Hey friend, and welcome back to the Alex Makes VR podcast. In today's episode, I am joined by post-production powerhouse Randa Debaje. She is an XR developer for PwC UK, and in this episode, she takes us through the whole post-production process for creating a VR training experience in Unity. Now, the specific project that we talk about in this episode is one that I've talked about in several podcasts now, but specifically we talked at length about it in last week's episode, where I sat down and talked with Louise Liu and Jeremy Dalton from PwC UK about the In My Shoes project. For those of you who haven't listened to that yet, and I highly recommend you go listen to that, the In My Shoes project is a diversity and inclusion training project that is being used globally to transform the way employees are being trained in diversity and inclusion. It was a really exciting project to be a part of, not just because of the impactful content, but specifically from a technical point of view. This was the most ambitious project I have ever been involved with. Instead of going the kind of safe route and making this a nice, simple 360 video experience, we decided to push the limits basically of all of our skill sets and the technology itself. We decided to make this a volumetric video interactive branch narrative VR experience for Oculus Quest. Now, for those of you who don't know the technicalities of something like that, this project on paper should have been impossible, close to impossible anyway. But lo and behold, in this episode, Randa talks us through how they made it possible. She talks us through all of the challenges that they overcame, all of the intricate details that were considered in order to make this project a success. We also talk by the end about just Unity in general and how you yourself, listener, can get started with the basics of working in a program like Unity, which is so powerful and one of the industry standard for the VR industry. So we talked about loads. I can't wait for you to listen to this one. If you've got any questions or future kind of episode suggestions, I would love to hear from you. As always, it's Alex Makes VR on Instagram and Twitter. And you'll hear Randa talk about where you can find her. And I'll put links down to her social medias in the description below. But I'll stop rambling now. Enjoy my conversation with Randa Debaje. Randa, you are here to demystify all of the complex post-production process that went into the recent volumetric, interactive, branch narrative piece, PwC's In My Shoes. Randa, welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself.
What an intro, Alex. Well, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I'm Randa Debaje. I am a XR, VR, AR developer at PwC, and I work closely with Jeremy and Louise, and we worked very closely on this project as well together.
I'm excited. And for those of you, I guess, because I just dived straight in there because I'm excited to talk to you about this project that we worked on for several months. But for those people that haven't listened to that podcast with Jeremy and Louise, and for those who haven't heard me talk about this project before, the In My Shoes project, why don't you give us a bit of a rundown of what that project is and what it entailed?
Okay. So this project is about diversity and inclusion, being in the shoes of someone going through microaggressions at work. And the main element of this project was making sure that everything looks really realistic. So the characters had to show certain emotions that the user could read properly. The environments had to feel real. So making sure that if it's morning, it really feels like morning, or if it's evening, it feels like it's evening. And it's little things like also making sure rooms actually look like there's people living in it and people using the actual kitchen and the bedroom as well. There's, it was so hard making it seem like it's people that are living here. So that was mainly from the technical side. That the project that the focus of the project is making it look realistic, and that's where volumetric capture comes into the play, which is what you spoke with Jeremy and Louise about previously. And we had a number of options when we were trying to pick what kind of characters we wanted to use in this project. And we went from stylized to body scans to volumetric, and we spent a good month trying to figure out what are the pros and cons of each character. And with stylized, it was difficult because we're kind of working in a corporate environment and we need people to really feel like these are real humans. But then there's always that with 3D modeled characters or with body scans, there was always this fear that the characters might look creepy, because a lot of the scenes you had the characters stand. It's true though, how sometimes they blink at you and then it's like they're maybe blinking too fast or they're blinking too slow, and you're like, okay, this looks creepy, I don't know how to like connect with this character.
Yeah, so true.
So that's how we ended up with deciding at the end with volumetric capture. And even though we knew like there was one big limitation to volumetric capture, and this would be like one of the biggest challenges that we'd have to face, and that was the file size of the videos. And
give people a bit of an indicator on how big we're talking with volumetric capture file size wise.
So if we wanted to go for like the best quality, like we wanted this to look like like 8K or large files and super high quality, high good colors, it would have been like, maybe for the entire experience, I would say like maybe 40-50 gigabytes, sorry. But we went for, I think it was 2K resolution in the end. I think it was that. But we ended up with 18 gigabytes. So you can imagine that does not fit in one APK, because you were limited to 4 gigabytes, I think. So we had to kind of create a system where you can load the videos from outside the APK. Now the challenging part is because we use enterprise headsets and we push things through the cloud to APKs through the cloud to the headsets, but we can't do that with the video, so we have to sideload all the videos, manually plugging it in the computer and then pushing these videos onto the headset. Now the problem is the APK moves off the headset, all these videos are gone. So like we have to like tiptoe around pushing these onto headsets and making sure we don't remove the wrong files of the headsets, because if the headsets are with someone on another side of the world, they're going to open up the application and there's going to be voiceovers, but there's going to be no characters at all. So that was, that's something we're still dealing with as well.
Well, it's fascinating because part of the process of this project for me was kind of understanding all of these limitations right up front to be able to kind of like write and direct it properly. But then luckily for me, as soon as we finished the shoot, it was kind of like hands off over to you guys. So I was stressed out of my mind up to the point where it was kind of completed production. But I didn't even know that there was like all of this going on in the background. I mean, I always knew that that it was going to be a technically complicated process getting it to work, especially on Quest, but I had no idea that you were having to kind of come up with all these different solutions, and even now you're having to kind of to almost work around them, which is fascinating and shows though like what a kind of innovative project it actually is. And I feel like other people or other organizations might have been put off by that, but that's one of the beautiful things about you guys in your team at PwC is you're like, oh, that's impossible. We'll see about that.
We're gonna do it. Yeah. We're still gonna do it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really fascinating. And so let's dive into, talk me through. I mean, you've kind of given a really nice overview of what the project is and what some of the challenges were along the way. But let's rewind and take me through from even before we actually captured the actors in the volumetric studio. From before that, what was going on? Talk me through the actual process step by step. Who was involved? What were the elements that had to come together from a post-production standpoint?
Okay. So obviously you were involved in the beginning steps of this project, and we all knew that there were the one of the limitations with this volumetric capture as well was the fact that we only had a 2 meter radius to work with. So say that we wanted some characters to walk into the room, we had to make sure like the environment was designed to for the user not to pick up the fact that they've actually just appeared out of nowhere rather than actually walk from a door.
Mm.
So we in before we did the capture, we worked with a concept artist, and we passed the script to him, and we said, okay, so we need characters to walk from here to here. We need this character to stand here, but we don't want to see their feet or little things like this. And eventually, we came up with some environments, prototypes of the environments where we put the radius of the 2 meters around, and we could see from what point to what point the characters were going to walk to. Now, the good thing with working with CGI as well is that, you know, even if afterwards someone made a mistake in the volumetric capture period where we're capturing the characters, and you know, it didn't really match what environment we were making, we could still change the environment. So that was always kind of like a good thing to know. Like, we can still change where the wall is going to start and it's going to end. So when we were doing, I was there on the day of the shoot, and we had a Oculus headset, and we had everyone kind of like envision the environment, what it would look like, and the space that they could walk in, and then we showed that to the characters, to the actors as well, and they were able to kind of imagine like what wall they were going to come through, or also like when they were sitting on the stool and they had to pretend to work on a laptop, and even that was just like, you know, like it was so challenging to see,
Mm.
like, oh my god, like I hope their hands are in the right position, like, no, like otherwise we have to like really like make this table shorter or taller, or it's just little things like this that was very challenging, and you just hope it's going to go well. Like, you just hope like this is, you know, this is the right path we're going, because we only find out once we get the footage and we put it into the environments.
Well, and that's kind of this, because even just then you were saying that, I remember, do you remember we kind of had in like meeting scenes, for example, we'd have to tell the actors, you can't lean on the chair because your elbow, if it moves even like a centimeter, it's going to go through the chair, and we can't like that, we maybe can't do much about in post. So like, so make sure you keep your arms in, and there were so many different things like that, like you say, that although yeah, you could have loads of control in post, like move a wall here or move a door there to make it so that they're not walking through that in post. Still, there were like these things where we weren't sure until it was over and you could bring it into the environment. We weren't sure that it was potentially going to work, which was a
Yeah.
fascinating way to work. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're actually still like, there's still some things now I see and others don't see, but there's hands going through tables and stuff. So we're
Oh,
just glad that we could
really?
hide it. Yeah.
These can be Easter eggs.
So yeah, then after obviously capturing and everything, we had to start working on the environment, but without the actual footage. So we had 3D modelers, 3D artists. We had an environmental artist work with us on creating the environment, the materials, and you know, a lot of the rooms as well were like, the design wise was very bespoke. So it was kind of like, I remember walking around like the office space and just thinking, oh, like, what is it that makes an office seem like an office? And you know, like, what is the wood, like, how can you actually, it's kind of like interior design in a way, because I'm
Yeah.
thinking, okay, like, what is it that goes with white wood that makes the curtain looks better, or like all these things are going into factors. And also ensuring, for example, that, you know, if you have a kitchen and a bedroom in the same space, they need to have the same wood colors, they need to have the same curtains.
Yeah.
If you're trying to show two different offices, you don't want them to kind of look the same. You have to make sure that they look very different, so that people understand that you're in another office at this point. So it
Fascinating.
was, yes, it was communicating these ideas with working with the 3D artists to create these environments. And then obviously when we got the volumetric videos, you know, some things we realized didn't work, or we had to change the environments a little bit, or And then also
talk to
thinking,
me about that. Talk to me about like what specific things like might you have to change about an environment and why?
it was things like, so there was a kitchen scene where we had the character had to walk out of the kitchen, and she started walking into the wall, and you could kind of see that she was walking eventually like again through the kitchen. So it's little things like that. We panicked a little bit at first, but we realized we could just mask her out, so we didn't have to make much change in that sense. But also, for example, in the kitchen as well, where the character is doing something over the stove, we had to move the stove a little bit to a different location, like to the side a little bit, because if she turns around, she's no longer looking at you. So it was like the small details like that. And there was also some walls that we had to move to make sure that um that you don't see the character just like randomly appear from nowhere. But yeah, there was, yeah.
Hello,
Yeah.
surprise.
Yeah, and it's actually funny because a lot of users as well tend to stand up and look around. So like
Oh,
we have to make sure as well,
really?
if you stand up and then also look to your left or look to your right, you don't see these mistakes.
That's really funny. Oh, and well, that was something that I wanted to chat to you about, and we will come back because I realised that we were kind of going chronologically there, like through the different elements. But on that note, I remember one thing that I couldn't wrap my head around, and still, to be quite frank, can't wrap my head around is with 360, like I know exactly where the user's head is going to be. So I know that I can tell my actors to look at a specific lens on the camera, and I know that that is going to be direct eye contact with my audience. I know that. But when it came to volumetric, the thing that I couldn't fathom is that we were in this, obviously this the volume, the studio that we were filming in, with all these cameras everywhere. And I was like, well, surely we just like pick one camera and then that is the audience. But no, it wasn't like that. It was like the eye line constantly moved. And then obviously, yeah, taking that a step further, your audience, because it's a 6 degrees of freedom piece where technically they could, if they wanted to, walk around the whole scene. Yeah, how do you guys in post-production think about that, in terms of, we've got these actors who are supposed to be talking to you as the main character, because spoiler alert, in my shoes, you're literally in someone else's shoes. But how do you deal with that if someone does start to kind of like stand up and move a bit and walk around? Do you think, how did you kind of think about that, I guess?
So I mean, we obviously do not advise for anyone to stand up and use their with their headset and just start walking around the room. In general, that's for safety reasons.
Yeah. Mainly because
But
we
it
don't want
was,
any injuries.
yeah, it was literally just making like a walls like a bit longer to make sure that even if they stand up and look over, they don't see things. It was also like things under the table. Like there was, because obviously like they're sitting, like what you're seeing is that they're sitting on a table and then using their laptops, but what you don't see is that they're actually like inside their chair rather than sitting on their chair. So it was like hiding things like that. That was a major challenge. But in terms of eyeline as well, it was working with volumetric video as well, is that you just have to play the scene as well, and then you get the actual video to play, and then you have to move your head. Whereas there was some scenes that we had 3 characters, and then you have 2 of them that were filmed together and one of them that was filmed separately. So the eye lines were off a little bit, and you just have to kind of like find the center point, like find where does it feel like all of them could potentially be looking. Because either way, like sometimes, when people adjust their guardian differently, they might end up at like a slightly different spot than others. So you're kind of hoping that it is along those lines. But most of the scenes, the eyeline was very successful. Like people, the director and the producer at the studio did a really good job at making sure like the eyeline was well enough to make it look like they're really looking at the user at the right position as well. And the good thing as well as working in Unity is that you can always just change where the character, like where the user is, to make sure that it aligns with everything. Like I guess you don't have that limitation with you're not forced to stick to like a wrong eyeline. You can always fix that in post-production. So There's ways around it. There's ways around everything in Unity. So.
I love that. I love, and we'll definitely come on to talking about Unity and then your kind of, I guess, journey into post production, because I'm fascinated by that as well. But let's keep on this thread of talking about, you know, each individual step. So we've talked about the environments, you know, they were done pre-shoot, and then obviously being able to adjust post-shoot and things like that. So what happens next? So you've got the environments are vaguely in a place where they're ready, and then you've been kind of given the volumetric kind of capture from the studio. What kind of happens next? What's the process of like bringing them all together like?
So the next step was putting them into the environment. We were going back and forth with the studio about because there was like several ones that we could pick from, and from what second it goes in, what second it comes out. Also, so other things that we were going back and forth with the studio was about the coloring, because obviously like they're working on a flat screen. What you see on a flat screen is very different what you're going to see in the Quest. So it was, you know, the coloring, was it looking similar to the environment, was it not looking similar to the environment, was it looking realistic? So it was going back and forth with the studio, and at the same time we were working with an environmental artist who was creating all the shaders for the environment. So because there was a lot of things that were shiny and things that we wanted to look realistic.
I was going to say, just explain what a shader is for those who don't know, including myself.
It's like a programmed material, if that's the right way to describe it. You kind of program the way that you want a material to act. So if you want to make something like shiny, or it kind of uses a lot of the power and the performance of the headset. So you can kind of code your way out of making it more optimized and to work better in the headset. So we had the environmental artist working on that for us, and he did a really good job at really making things look like they're real. Like it was little things like the 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 fridge as well. Like it just feels like you just kind of want to go up and open it and then see what's in there. But and then on top of that, so we have obviously the environment is very separate to the volumetric video, and bringing them together and then making sure also the lighting works for both of them was a bit of a challenge, because you know, some things could make the character look a bit weird, but it makes the environment look weird. So you have to kind of like find the middle ground between that. So that was basically the next step. So we did a lot of testing and going into the headset and making sure like it's running smoothly and things aren't really crashing or slowing down or lagging or anything like that. So yeah, that was
So
a
can
big
you
one.
do because when we actually filmed it in the studio, it's kind of consistent lighting, it's the same regardless. So is that kind of, is the lighting of the scene all done in post? And do you, like you say, do you have to kind of, are you lighting the characters and the environment separately, or when you get it into Unity all together, are you just kind of casting the same lighting on both?
Yeah, so you cast the same lighting on both. It was because even though the character, so they when they have lighting in the studio itself, they're lighting it to get the most out of the details of the character of the actor or actress. But when you bring it into Unity, you might, for example, this is just a random example, nothing to do with the project, but say you want that character to be in a dark room, but they're quite lit up, is that you kind of need to make sure that they're on the same level of lighting, I guess. So that's a good way to explain it, I think.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So you've gotten the environments, you've gotten the characters in, you've made it look beautiful, the details are there. It, you know, the environments are as realistic as they can be to make sure that the kind of the photorealism of the characters and the environment aren't jarring. So it's all nice and smooth. And then you gotta chuck on top interactivity because this, after all, is a branch narrative. Talk to me about that, because I mean, even a linear volumetric video would have been quite the task, especially to run on Quest. Like say, now add on top of that this layer of decision making. So where does that come into the process? Is that the very last thing, or is that a consideration like beforehand? Talk to me about that.
It was a consideration throughout, I think, because I mean, knowing that there was like two branches of like three different scenes as well, it just added more like more storage, like we needed to work with more material. But then I guess also the challenge for all of us, like you included, was getting it to look like, it's a smooth continuation. Like, so you have obviously, for example, scene one, and then you have two decision points, so scene 1A, scene 1B, and they're all filmed separately, and you need to make sure like they continue and they look really smooth enough to for the character to the user to really to feel like they've, like it hasn't really discontinued the scene. Now the good thing is that it was a difficult thing to deal with in production. And post production, it was, just we had to make sure that, when we're going from scene 1 to scene 1A, is, it doesn't seem like it's discontinued. So all we did really is just to put a fade in and fade out, and it was really smooth. You really don't feel like, that they were filmed at separate times. You really feel like it was a continuation of each. So in terms of the interaction, I think it was more during production that was a challenge rather than the post-production parts.
That's very true, because there was the way that we had to give the listeners a bit of an insight. The way we had to do that is by having choreographing the action of the actor to kind of end in a kind of neutral pose, so that every time they got to a split, they could then resume that kind of exact neutral pose to then continue the scene, so that there was this kind of natural place that actor could go back to, so that they could kind of look as close to as if they, we hadn't cut the scene in half. Which for me, I always think that those kind of things, that and getting the actors to perform against a recorded take of the other actors, those two were the biggest things for me, that I thought, if there's any technical challenges that, I'm responsible for making sure that works, those two were it. And it sounds like we managed to pull it off, which is really exciting. But again, those are things that, like I say, like we went into this with all of these massive kind of challenges to overcome anyway, to make this project what it was, but then add in those decision makings. I mean, we really did go for it.
I think we did a really good job. Like, I remember, like, towards the end of the finishing of the project, I remember I hadn't gone through the entire thing yet. I hadn't watched it from one end to the other, and I watched it finally, and I wanted to cry for two reasons. One of them being like it was really emotional. So like I didn't realize how powerful that experience was. Like, you really feel like you're in the shoes of someone else. And then secondly, I was just so proud that we managed to pull this off. Like, I was like, I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe that vision that we had, not just like for the characters, but also for the environments, this actually came to life. Like I really thought, like, because I was seeing all these other applications, and I was like, oh, like the environments might not look that great, they might not look realistic. Like, I was really worried that, like this was gonna fail or something. But really, I think we really pulled it off. And I think, like, how we work as a team, and whatever is impossible, we're gonna go for it. So that's exactly what we did. So no, it was worth the tears and the sweat that went through it.
Yeah, definitely. And those are the moments where, like you say, like you halfway through it, you think, why did we think this was a good idea? We could have gone in with something so much easier. But actually, like you say, the impact of it, and when you see it pulled together, and then especially when you start to kind of see people that had nothing to do with the project, those people that kind of experience it for the first time, and they're not looking at the hand that might be slightly going through a laptop, or they wouldn't know that those three characters are not actually in the same room when they are recording that. They don't know any of that stuff, and that kind of makes it that makes it all the more magical when you kind of, like you say, when you pull it off. But I want to talk a little bit about, so we've kind of talked through the three key elements, as I see it anyway, for the post-production. Is there anything else apart from sound? Because I do want to get onto sound in a minute, but is there anything else from a visual point of view that you had to kind of consider along the way?
No, I think we've covered, I believe we've covered everything.
Amazing. So let's talk about sound, because sound is often, even just in this conversation, for example, it's the last thing that you kind of discuss. But weirdly, the sound makes or break a project, right? Like we can get away with so much visually, but if the sound is off, if your sound, especially for a project like this where you are in the shoes of the main character, selling that to the audience, like sound is so important. So talk me through the kind of the way that you worked with Luke, the sound engineer who did the post-production.
So it was, I think also Luis worked very close with him on the sound stuff. And Luke was working with us to put these sounds into the environment and everything. But, it was a challenge because you have the inner voice and then you also have sounds from the environment. So how do you make sure that the user understands that it's the inner voice that's talking and it's not someone else like around you that you can't see? So it was things like when the inner voice is on, you have to make sure that all the sounds in the environment are cut out from the scene. You have to make sure, because also we had the sound separately to the videos. So he was working on the sounds differently. So you have the videos in the environment, and we had to basically find a way to match exactly where the sounds were coming from, making them spatial, and also aligning them with the speed of the mouth and everything. Because normally people just go in, they put it with the video, and you just have the video there, and it just works seamlessly that way. But we chose to have it separately because we wanted to add an effect. So like inner voice also sounds very different than how you would have someone else speak. It was also things like, for example, when you're in a lift, like what are the things you hear in a lift? It's like you have to hear the door open, you have to hear the lift going up and down. So it was very crucial, and I think also music came into play a lot. Sometimes when you have like an emotional or strong scene, adding a bit of sound makes it even more emotional and empowering.
Yeah.
And I remember as well things like covering up mistakes, and you know about this, but the script that we had an issue with, and we were said something that we were not supposed to say. So coming up with an idea of how we can like make sure that this doesn't appear was also like a challenging part. But I think so I think the sound was amazing. Like Luke did a really good job at the end. Like everything I had envisioned for the environment to have sound, like it was just perfect.
That's amazing. And because I remember, I mean, firstly, I totally agree with you about the whole music just elevates, especially an experience like this that is supposed to have so much emotional impact. Like music just kind of, even just a little bit of music throughout just really kind of elevates it. But I remember when we were going through the post-production phase, and like I've mentioned to the listeners, I wasn't very close to that because I had already gone, well, over to you guys at this point. But I remember there being conversation about things like making sure that the sound and the video were loading at the same time so there wasn't any sync issues. So again, was this a byproduct of choosing to create this piece for Quest specifically? Was that a byproduct or a consideration because audio and video were kind of being treated separately? How did you guys deal with that?
It was I think it was because I wasn't the one that worked closely with the sound and the videos per se. But there was trying to understand, for example, because we had so many different clips. So like you have the internal voice, and then you have the users and environment, and then you have another internal voice, and then stitching them together to make sure like it's the same length as the whole environment, and then also making sure that the environment changes scenes after all the audio. So it was like it's a very bespoke, I think, process of working, that I would say. So it was kind of understanding, okay, like this happens here, so we should probably put this here instead. And so it was quite bespoke. I think it was no right or wrong way to do it. I think we just kind of went with what we thought would be right to do.
Yeah, amazing. And was that using Unity as well? The whole piece post-production wise came together in Unity, is that right?
Everything, yeah. Except I think Luke probably used some other sound tools, but
yeah,
he helped us put them into Unity as well. So.
And speaking of Unity, is there a particular reason why, because I know, and for those listening, just in case they are even less educated on the subject as I am, and I'm pretty uneducated when it comes to game engines. But the two big ones are Unity and Unreal. Is there a particular reason why Unity was better for this project than Unreal, other than just the people that were on board, that was their skill set?
It was literally because all of us just use Unity.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, we only use Unity in our team. We don't really use Unreal.
And why is that? Explain, because again, I'm totally oblivious to any of this stuff. So it'd be great to understand what is the difference between those two game engines.
So from my understanding, so they both use two different languages. So if you're stuck on one, it's unlikely that you'll go to the other one, although some people have expertise in both. But I think the main reason is that we see a lot of the VR stuff more apparent in Unity rather than in Unreal. Although, don't get me wrong, Unreal does have, you can create VR applications on there, but what we're finding is a lot of the main clients and consumers and everything, majority of them use Unity for VR. The tools are more apparent there. I mean, also when we find like, a lot of the times I find that if companies are providing SDKs or something, it's almost always Unity rather than Unreal.
Got
But
it. So
Unreal is not, sometimes it's more used for things that have like visually pleasing look to it. So a lot of people are now creating movies and stuff using Unreal. So if you're kind of looking in that direction, Unreal is good. I think if you're looking towards the VR stuff, it will be Unity.
Right. And so, yeah, for someone who is quite interested in all of this, how do people start to get educated on Unity? Like, how would you suggest how people can get started with learning about this tool?
Okay, so the good thing about Unity, it's free, so you can go and download the application. You can start using it whenever you want. The other good news is that Unity has a lot of free tutorials on getting started. If you want to go into 2D gaming, if you want to go into 3D gaming, if you want to do VR, AR, it's all there. Unity provides all free tutorials for that. At the same time, you will find so many YouTubers and YouTube tutorials that will teach you everything that you need to know. It was how I started. I literally just created like a very simple game just to understand like the physics and what goes behind it, and just the just the input, like how do I make sure like when the user clicks left, they go actually left. It's little things like that, and from there you realize, oh, okay, there's so much. You should come up with some sort of like idea that you have, and try to apply and create a project out of that. So I do really recommend just getting into it, finding a tutorial that you want to do. Simple starts, don't go crazy initially, and when you get the basics, you realize how everything is so much easier, like it's so easy to do eventually. So
that's
that's my
amazing
piece of
advice. I love that. And I love the advice of just like getting stuck in and just making something as you go along. I feel like I preach the same kind of thing when it comes to 360 video and learning how to direct and learning about frame composition and all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing. Just get out there, get your hands dirty, especially because something like Unity, if you've got a laptop, chances are it's probably going to be at least good enough just to run, a little kind of something. It might not be able to run, super high end VR kind of making on Unity, if that's even a phrase. But the barrier to entry is, as if you've got a laptop, then you could probably start to learn Unity. Whereas obviously on the filmmaking side of things, you obviously have to buy the kit or rent it or whatever.
Yeah.
So the barrier is like super low. But I love this. I think that especially with a project like this, what we've kind of proven is that if things seem like they're impossible, if things seem like they are too out of reach, if you feel like you've got this idea but you just don't feel like there is a way to actualize it, with a tool like Unity, you can make all of those things possible, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like anything, nothing is impossible. Because you're just recreating. So if you want to recreate an environment, you're just literally recreating it into Unity. It almost feels like it's limitless. It becomes limiting when it comes to the hardware, I think. But with Unity as a software, it feels like it's limitless. You can do whatever you want with it, and you can create whatever you want with it. So yeah.
Now that's interesting and is a perfect kind of segue into kind of talking about the distribution, because like you say, this this piece would not have been a problem if we were rolling it out onto a high-powered PC, high-end, VR headset with unlimited power. Like, we could have done whatever we wanted with this, essentially, because as long as we've got the processing power and the graphics cards, we're
Yeah.
golden. The big bottleneck was rolling out for Quest. So you mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but now we've given the audience the context of the whole project. Let's come back to distributing this and talk through the process of, you've built it in Unity, now what?
Okay, so I mentioned earlier the problems of the file size of the videos and everything. So in order to get the videos onto the headsets, is we have to plug it into a computer, move these videos onto a file inside the Quest, and then you can basically up and run it. Now, the problem we have is that a lot of our headsets are all around the world, and we use an enterprise version of the headset. So in order for you to get applications on there, you have to do it through a cloud. So you just send it to these headsets through a cloud. You can send the APK, so the actual application itself, but you cannot send the videos themselves. So what we've done is we've initially just side loaded them. So we plugged them all into computers, and we just drag and drop them into the headset. But now when you have bigger amounts of headsets, and you have like 1 or 2 people to only do this, so we're talking about 100, 200 headsets, or eventually there might be more. We'd want to find a way to be able to remotely download these videos. So we created an APK which you can just directly download them from the cloud. But for some reason, even that's proving difficulty, because sometimes it crashes, sometimes it doesn't. So we obviously don't want to have a headset that's in like New Zealand, and they've just tried to run it and it's just crashing right before a workshop that they're about to run. So we have to basically make sure that there's troubleshoot guidelines. We have to warn people that, please go in beforehand and make sure that the app isn't crashing. Or if it is crashing, reach out to us and then we'll fix it for you. So there's a lot of ongoing maintenance with this project. Now, if it was not enterprise and it was a consumer headset version, or we were kind of using it inside the office and we weren't really sending it across the world, it would have been much easier, because before we give it to anyone, we like double check and make sure that everything is there, and then they can go do their workshop and come back. But because it's internationally, it's quite challenging. But we're up for challenges. You know how we work in our team. So
Exactly.
It's all right. It doesn't bother me anymore.
You've gotten over the feeling of being kind of comfortable and bored. Now it's all about, what's the next impossible task that you're going to have to overcome. But with that, will it become easier? Like, are you still looking into ways to, or is it literally a case of you've tapped out now? Like, this is as small as the files are going to get. You're just going to have to deal with the fact that this is, until we get 5G, for example, which will allow you to download 50 gigabytes in however many seconds. Until then, is this it? Or are you still trying to find ways of optimizing this?
This is it, Alex. Like, there's no other. We tried everything that we could.
Everything.
Like, we came down to this point, and we're like, okay, this is like the only way that we can make sure that if someone's remote somewhere and they literally have the APKs disappeared off their headset, or someone did something and they accidentally removed it, we know for sure that if they run this application, it will still try to download the videos, and they won't go into the environment and then find out that there's actually no characters. And also, we know from our side, and we're sure that no one's going to go into the environment without the characters being there. So that was like one of the most important thing that we wanted. But doesn't get any better. Like, it does not get any better. If we had really fast Wi-Fi, like even I had really, really slow Wi-Fi like 3 months ago, and I would have been impossible to download these videos. So we always, I guess, before sending anything, we also make sure that we've downloaded them from our end. But funny enough, we found out the office doesn't even have fast enough Wi-Fi to do the stuff.
And if PwC don't have fast enough Wi-Fi, what hope does anyone have?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but I think that this is fascinating, right? Because this really does remind me of the first days of definitely my experience of getting into VR when I first started getting into 360 and trying to understand how on earth I was going to crunch, a 20 gigabyte MP4 to the point where it would run smoothly and it would be easy to send, like you say, over Wi-Fi remotely to people to see my 360 projects. And it's so funny that no matter how far we've come, it's still a problem, obviously, because as we're getting better as we're getting more advanced forms of capture, as we're getting more advanced with the utility of VR, we're still bumping up against that kind of friction point between the software and the hardware, which I find fascinating, because I think that is one thing that until that's solved, well, not until it's solved, because we're already making massive strides in this industry, like phenomenal strides. And the fact that we keep coming up against these things and then innovating around them is why the industry is successful. But I feel like the second that becomes frictionless, we're like a rocket ship, like we're off. There will be nothing that stops us, because like you said, when you even experienced this project, having worked so closely to it, so you would have thought that would have kind of dampened the emotional experience, but you still had this very visceral emotional reaction to watching this piece. And imagine if we had the kind of hardware and the kind of limitations removed of getting it to thousands of people and they could all have that experience. That would be amazing.
Yeah, but hope we can make it work as a team. Like we'll make sure that 1,000 people will go through it eventually.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and they will not realize there's any difficulties behind it
until they listen to this podcast, and they'll be like, "Whoa, I have a newfound respect for that." No, it's true, because the plan is to get it seen by all 22,000 PwC UK employees, right? Let alone the global kind of impact of this project, right?
Yeah. That was when the pressure is on. So you need to make this happen, and as well, like it's so much easier if we just went for the typical 360 film, and because of COVID we couldn't, and we knew like we were gonna have to find a common ground and make it seem like this was almost a 360 film, but it's not. Like that's how realistic we wanted it to be. So even that pressure, like having to make sure that it fits into this corporate like environment and this model for the training that they're doing, like it was really important, because eventually we had like a conversation about making it stylized. We're like, okay, this, a lot of people will not accept this, or they won't really understand it, or they might not feel the connection with the characters. So yeah, no, it is a crazy challenge that we went through, but yeah, we're not even done yet. Like it's just the start now, I think.
Which is crazy, right? Because I remember Louise and I had our first call about this project last May or June, I think it was. So it's wild that even nearly a year on, this is when the fun just begins, because this is when people start to actually put it into action and it's started to use in the way that it's supposed to be. So yeah, so I just want to quickly rewind to the fact that, because you've said the word stylized a couple of times, I know what that means, but I just want, for any listener who might not know what we're talking about when we're talking about the difference between stylized versus photorealistic, do you just want to kind of like clarify and maybe give an example of what something that is stylized might be?
So a stylized character is more like what you see in cartoons, for example, where they have like a bit, big eyes, or they have a specific style. So all the characters have like a specific kind of style to their face. So it's kind of like when you're watching one like cartoon film, like how they all have a specific style of how their face is or what they're dressed, and that's kind of what stylized is.
Amazing. Thank you for clarifying that, because I think it's interesting, because like you say, there is something so powerful about VR, but when you then come face to face with another human being in a potentially real environment, that's when, to me, it kind of like levels up. And that's, like you say, why we chose to go down the route, even though it about gave us all early kind of strokes.
Yeah.
for making it volumetric. That's essentially
Yeah.
why we kind of chose it, is because that connection that you get from being face to face with a human is slightly different to being face to face with a characterization of a human.
And there was also the possibility of using 3D scans, I remember, but the face kind of looked creepy, and because it's supposed to be like a real human like standing in front of you, but once they start talking, it was really hard to make it seem like it was real. So volumetric was a good choice.
Talk to me about that. Because I don't think we went into too much detail about that in the podcast I did with Jeremy and Louise. What would that have looked like? So if we had done just a 3D scan of a character, would that have been animated in Unity? How would have that differed?
So we would have had, so if we get a 3D scan, we literally just get like the kind of the texture around the character. So what we would have had to do is we would have had to bring in a 3D animator. Actually, we would have, at this, with the many characters we had, we would have probably had to like have multiple different animators at that point. But they need to create a skeleton for this character. It's really hard sometimes to create a skeleton out of like a 3D scan. And the next steps would have been to go into a motion capture studio, and also get a rig for the face, because you have facial movements, you have smiles, blinks, all these kind of needed to be captured. But after you leave the motion capture studio, you have the motion capture data, and that needs to be cleaned up. Now, maybe 10 years ago, that would have been a very impossible, like a very difficult task. Nowadays, it's become much easier, but you still get some glitches. You still get some, I mean, with the time frame that we had, it seemed like it was almost impossible to go down that route as well. But you still have that, you have that power, though, to still change things from how they were when you filmed this. You can have the animators, for example, change where the hand is or where it goes, but these things take time, and it's a lot of, you need a bigger team to work on it. You need a lot more people a lot more animators, and then obviously bringing that into Unity in the environment, you need to make sure it all works together and seamlessly. And again, it was, the facial emotions was very, very important. And with this kind of character model, it would have been quite a challenge with the amount of characters that we had.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, it's interesting, because one of the downsides of volumetric is similar to 360 film. Like, if it's not in the camera, it don't exist. Like,
Yeah.
you can't change it after the fact. Whereas with
Nope.
motion capture, maybe you'd have a bit more control, but it comes along with so many more complications and having to 10x the post-production process, which I don't think wouldn't have been timeline or budget friendly. But yeah, really interesting. Well, I feel like we have talked about, I feel so lucky to have gotten to work with you on this project, Randa. Seriously, it's been an absolute pleasure. And let the people know, like, what even brought you into XR? Because obviously I've known you since you started with PwC, but tell the people a little bit about how you even got into this kind of crazy stuff.
So how I got into it is doing my master's degree. I was doing a lot of 3D stuff, and I had like no experience in 3D, and I absolutely loved it. And I was like, oh, this is amazing! You can create whatever you want. You can recreate everything. You can do whatever you want, basically. And we had a Unity module, and initially I was like, oh, it's coding. I don't want to do coding again, because I did my entire undergrad in coding. And then we had to create a game, and I started to really enjoy it for some reason. I was like, oh, this is really nice. Like, I created this runner game where you run, and it's about health and picking up water and making sure like your heart rate is at the same level. And then we went into, during the year we were taught about what are the things you can do with Unity, and it's like one of them was VR and AR. And I love the idea of doing VR and AR, but my biggest worry was that I'm not really a typical gamer. I don't want to work in a gaming industry, because I don't really fit in. I wanted to do more of the things like the kind of work we're doing now. Like this to me was like where I wanted to be, and to benefit, society, to benefit different industries, and especially things like the medical field,
Mm.
and the construction field. Like the amount of training you can give people like offsite is insane. Like even things where people are in dangerous situations and they have to kind of, you know, you don't want to put them in there to train them, but you can do it via VR. And those were the things that really, really made me want to get into XR. And when I was looking for jobs, and you know, I was still applying to these gaming companies, but I knew deep down I was like, I'm not, like, you know, I'm probably not the perfect candidate for them because I don't game a lot. Like I'm not always, I do game sometimes, but like I'm not a typical, you know, it's not what I do every day.
Yeah.
So then yeah, I found this role at PwC, and I got it. So I'm here now and doing things that I want to be doing. So, and yeah, especially
Amazing.
this project was like, you know, the one thing that I came in for was for things like this. So
Making an
yeah.
impact with your work. And
Yeah.
what have you, because when we first met and you were just starting, obviously you were kind of across the board having to like dip your toes in every different aspect, from like stitching 360 to, like you say, like these kind of like rolling out apps on Unity, to AR, to kind of 2D capture placed in kind of AR applications. So what's like been the best thing that you've like enjoyed learning about since being kind of part of the team?
Honestly, I really enjoy every part of it. There was nothing that I hated. There's nothing that I didn't enjoy. Like, especially now, it's so nice knowing that I can have multiple different types of projects. I'm not just working on CGI. I'm not just working on 360 film. I know that one project might be AR, the other project might be like, especially like, I'd never thought I would be working with volumetric capture, and es- especially when I first joined the team, I realized that a lot of the work that we were doing were 360 film, and for the opportunities to come up that we're doing CGI and we're doing all these different things and trying out things was very exciting. So I think it's more, I find it more exciting rather than like dwelling, I guess.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed this part of the job a lot.
That's amazing, the kind of variety of stuff. And to put you on the spot, what's your kind of favorite piece as a consumer or in a work context? What's been your favorite piece of VR you've ever experienced yourself?
Experienced. Hmm.
And that can be anything from like a game, tilt brush, whatever.
Um. You know, recently I've really been enjoying Beat Saber. I never thought I would say this, but it's really fun. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, it's just that, you know what, the social parts as well. So recently, me and my friend, like, we've been experimenting a lot, going into like rec room and stuff, and we've just been having like a blast. Like, you'd never thought about this, but going into these rooms, like listening to people's conversations, there's just been parties. We went in and bashed the whole talent show. Like, it was really funny.
That's amazing. I remember when the pandemic first started and I went into Alt Space for the first time and had like a snowball rave. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is wild. This is a whole side of the industry I'd never seen before.
Yeah, no. So I think, and I think everything that I experience in VR is a different experience. I don't think I have really my favorite piece, but it's just, I think, periods. Like now I'm really enjoying Beat Saber. Maybe in a month's time I'll find something else that's fun to do. But yeah.
The funny thing is, like, people obviously not bash on Beat Saber, but Beat Saber is obviously such a front runner in the VR industry, especially in terms of getting people into it. I think that's for such a good reason, and it's because
Hmm.
no matter who I talk to, no matter how long they've been in the industry, Beat Saber is usually top 3 experiences. Same with myself. Like, as a consumer, the only thing that has gotten me into a VR headset, just as a general person, is Beat Saber. It's so
Yeah.
well done, and I feel like I'll be interested to see what the next Beat Saber is, whatever that might be,
Hmm.
that application that just gets everyone into it. Because even like my kind of brothers who obviously do work with me on VR projects, but they're not massively into it. And they are gamers. So I'm surprised that, you know, it hasn't kind of caught their attention beforehand. Even they ended up buying headsets purely for Beat Saber. So
It's
can't go
so
wrong.
fun. Yeah. There's no one that does not enjoy Beat Saber, I think. It's a
So
very
true.
arcade game. And like you could put it in an arcade and people would enjoy doing that together.
So true. It's basically the modern day dance mat. I don't know whether you
Yeah.
remember dance
Yeah.
mat. Love dance mat.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me for the podcast, Randa. I've really,
No,
really
thank
enjoyed it.
you for having me. This has
Amazing.
been fun as usual.
As always, and let the people know, where can they kind of follow you? Where can they catch you on the old social meds?
So Twitter for sure, which is Randa_Debaje. LinkedIn, for sure you can find me on there. And Instagram, so Randa Debaje. So these are the 3 places you can find me.
Amazing. And I'll link all of that down in the description. Again, thank you so much, Randa. And I'm sure we will speak again very soon.
Yeah, we shall.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Well, friend, I hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Randa, thank you so much again for joining me and giving us your time and sharing your expertise on all of this. And friend, listening, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you thought of this episode. Are you inspired to go and pick up a copy of Unity and start educating yourself? Are there any other questions or subjects on this, on post-production that you'd be curious about me covering in future episodes? Reach out to me, let me know. Alex Makes VR on Instagram and Twitter. And as I mentioned, I've included all of the links to Randa's social medias in the description. Please go and show her some love and support for giving us her time today. For now though, friend, enjoy your day wherever you are in the world, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next one.